welcome to the Aaron Werner podcast on iCode Media. Today I've got I call him my friend, but Dave, I'm going to start by complaining at you in just a second here.
Go for it, yeah.
But Dave MacKinnon with Promethean One, and Dave is my IT guy. And Dave, I'm sure you're going to tell me in just a second that your job is to protect me from myself.
That's
kind
right.
of like my job is to protect, my toddler children when they were toddlers, and now my grandson from himself. Don't jump down the stairs and stick forks into outlets and whatnot.
Right.
But I got to tell you, dude, this two-factor authentication nonsense and not being able to just download whatever app I want on my phone to seemingly make my life easier is it's got me a little frustrated. And it was a whole lot easier when I just lived in utopia where I could do whatever I want with whatever I want, and
well,
didn't have to worry about this.
That is the biggest complaint with security is, hey, I've got to answer a text, or I've got to type a number in, or whatever. And I'll say two things. One, it protects you, yes. So it's like the little kid safety locks on the outlet, right? But also it's getting better, right? So pass keys are a thing now, and it ties your mobile device to your account, and it kind of obviates the need for multi-factor authentication, but you don't have to do the whole find a code in text or type it in or whatever. So I think the big providers, the Microsofts and Googles of the world, have realized that it's a problem, and they're taking it seriously and trying to make it easier so that it's not painful and you don't have to remember 45 different passwords. But yeah, in the meantime, it is a bit of a pain.
It is. Well, Microsoft and Google, now that you say it, I do think they've gotten a little bit better. One has gotten better than the other, and I'm not going to call anybody out Microsoft Authenticator for being a pain in the rear end. But help me understand why.
Why?
Because I never had a problem before. And I know we've had Joe on and Joe DeLoach, and Joe's been on the Chris Wolf podcast, and I'll try to find that episode because he does a good job of, I think, highlighting some of the challenges. But you live in this world, so is this just a lot of nothing? Are you really protecting me from myself and the boogeyman that's out there?
Yeah, so Joe's a great guy, great resource. He and I trade emails on this stuff, pretty regularly. I really enjoy kind of picking his brain on stuff. I think the world has changed a little bit, right? AI's done part of that. These threat actors that are, international, they're not targeting you. They don't pick out, Warner Optometry or Aaron Warner and say, I'm going after that guy. They cast a wide net.
I'm not that special.
Yeah. And that's, in the past, I think a lot of people in your position were a little protected from, because they weren't the big companies, right? The hackers were going after the multi-billion-dollar companies and the multi-million-dollar companies that had cash and had, assets to protect, that would pay the ransomware fee and whatever. And those guys are very secure now. They're still vulnerable, but they've spent a ton of money and time on security. And so what the bad actors have done is essentially democratized their bad acts and tried to push it out as far as they can. And they don't care whether they catch, a grandma or the head of a business or a doctor or, just an average Joe. They're looking for, they're sending out as many, phishing requests, or they're casting a wide net, hoping to get the 0.1% to click and the 0.001% to put in their credentials, because that's all they need. And they're using AI to do it. Some of the attacks are very sophisticated. Even living in this industry, there are things that come through, whether they're emails or web pages or even text messages, where they look real. And it's hard for me to tell, even with my background, that they're not real. And so, to go back to why you have to do it, it's to protect you from yourself a little bit, but it's also to protect the information that's behind your account. So all the patient information, all the systems you have access to, all the employee information. It's to basically put another stopgap, another area in there, another moat around your business to say, that information is protected. You at least have to go enter in a 6-digit key or go run Authenticator or whatever. And that, for the most part, it stops a lot of the bad actors. Now, that's not to say that, if someone phishes your email and you put in your passcode and you put in the 6-digit code, they have access now and they have access to all that stuff. So, the world has changed a little bit. I mean, you think back 5-10 years, you might not have had that kind of global access to your entire business with one login with your Microsoft or Google account. You have that now, right? Your EHR system, all your telemetry systems, all that stuff, it's one login. And if it's not one login, then your passwords are saved under that login in a password finder or whatever. So, that one piece of information can open up a lot of doors for a bad actor.
That makes sense. I'm thinking as you're talking, and still trying not to dislike you because of the two-factor stuff. But it used to be when I wasn't in the office, and if a patient called after hours, I had no access to any of the records. Right, I could listen to them, but I wouldn't know. Now I've got essentially full capabilities to access the records, their images, and everything from my phone.
Right.
And I can document chart notes there. I can do a telehealth exam. I can submit prescriptions and whatever the case may be. So, that I guess it does make sense that all they need is that one universal key that unlocks every door, and they can get in. We've listened to Joe, so password 1 is no longer an appropriate password.
Right.
Neither is password 2. He's got something about his dog's eating tuna or something, but
people use. You can use whatever you want, but the way I try to get, because there's so many different passwords, the way I've tried to get people to think about it is use something, dog's name, whatever, but with some numbers, an address, a phone number, an address of the place you lived, throw in some special characters. And then if you stick with that theme, you can tend to remember, the password's a little easier and it makes it less stressful. Some people pick food or whatever, right? Like whatever their genre is. But I think passkeys make that a little simpler because it ties your mobile device directly to the authentication server in the back end. And so someone would have to literally take your phone and have access to that to be able to get in as you. That makes it a little easier to, for both the user and the information that's being secured. So, anyway.
Slightly different. One more step, but a smaller step than what it used to be. It felt like, climbing over a pony wall. And now it's just a little curb that I can step over.
Well, and I think the other thing that people maybe don't think about a lot is, you have your information's in that EHR system, but their security is only as good as your login, right? So you've kind of offloaded that responsibility for cyber attacks, to your EHR provider, but you're still a vulnerability. You as the person who has login and access to that information, and so you've offloaded some of the risk, but it's still inherent. That if you can get into that system and you can export information, you become the point of access, and your login information, makes all that information vulnerable again.
So that was a very nice way of calling me the weak link in this chain.
You are the weak link, yes. The people are always the weakest link. I mean, the way I talk to people about it is you're never going to be perfect, right? Training only gets you so far. Fake phishing emails and all that stuff, they only get you so far. It's really like a 3-step process of, the people, the process, right? So having moats around your information and building these security things in the way. And then at the last piece of it, it's just prevention. You're not going to get, you're never going to be perfect. And when you have that bad actor come in, it's important that if they do something, that they're limited in terms of what they can do, right? And so, kind of planning for the fact that you are going to get hit at some point. How do you mitigate that and keep whatever they're going to do as small and as manageable as possible?
Reminds me of the image of large ships, right, with the different compartments. So if the hull does get breached, the water only comes into one room or one section. It doesn't have access to the rest, so you don't sink the ship immediately.
I mean, a good example is like your network, Warner Optometry, right, is segmented so that practice devices are on one part, employee access is on another, and we don't have a guest network. And if for businesses that do, like, that's a third completely separate thing, right? And the idea there is that it's building a moat so that when that employee clicks that link and puts in their credentials or does something they're not supposed to or they shouldn't do, we're hoping to kind of limit the exposure to that slice of the network or the systems that they're on. So it's prevention, but it's also planning a little bit in terms of like, okay, we know there's a potential for us to have an issue here, and if we do, we want to kind of limit the scope of what that bad actor can do as much as possible. And that's where we spend a ton of time is taking kind of those enterprise solutions, those things that the big companies pay a lot of money for, and scaling them down for a small business so that they're not as expensive and onerous as what they see in a Fortune 500 company.
Got it. You brought up guest networks. Let's chat about that real quick, because you and I had an interesting conversation, and I am thinking, customer centric. I want to have a warm, welcoming place, and right. We got to have a guest network. And you looked at me and you said, dude, everybody has a cell phone. Like, why do you have to be their point of contact? Which reminded me that we're not a coffee shop. People aren't bringing their laptop in to get a cup of coffee and sit for 3 hours to do work. They shouldn't be sitting for that long.
Hopefully not, right? Yeah.
And so I appreciated that, and I have taken that to my entire team too, so they don't have access on any of their personal devices to any of my Wi-Fi systems, right? You've got a phone, you can connect to the internet through the phone if you need to.
Instagram or whatever you want to do in your break time. Well, so the other piece of it is it's the guest network cannot, in a lot of cases, and this happens a lot, where it's just one big flat network. And so I'll go into, a doctor's office or a dentist's office or something, and I'll be able to scan the network and see all their devices, right? Every printer, every telemetry device, everything. And there's a vulnerability there, right? Of being able to, if there's passwords that are, the default password for a printer or for a piece of therapeutic equipment or whatever, you can get into that, right? If I'm on the same network. So segmenting that is important. But the other piece is when you open that Wi-Fi network up, you become responsible for shepherding all that information that person may put in there, right? So they could, on like a comment form or something, put HIPAA information, and now you have to protect that, right? And if they're using your network to go to their insurance company, you as the owner of that network are responsible for protecting that. And so it just opens you up to a liability that isn't really worth it. And so, you want to provide that convenience, but what are you really getting out of it? Is it good for the patient experience? That's, maybe marginally true. But it does open you up to a lot of liability. And so it's best not to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think there was a difference before everybody had an iPad with cellular access and a phone with cellular access, right?
And unlimited data on their cellular plans or whatever.
They don't need me to go through there, and I certainly don't need the middle school kids sitting out front.
Well, and if you've got a patient sitting there for 3 hours wanting to do whatever, there's other problems, right? Like it's not a.
There's other system problems within the office. No, I agree.
Exactly.
You've brought up a couple of times, and you've mentioned price, expensive people in big companies, and this is a new space. And I remember, first time getting a Wi-Fi system, you invest in it. Now you can get one for $100 at Costco that it says they've got some security on it. And I'll be frank, and you and I, have a long friendship, and even before working through the business, when you came in and said, "Hey, here's what we can do," I was surprised at the number. Hopefully, my face didn't give too much away. Knowing me, I'm sure it did, but it was a larger number than I was expecting.
Right.
Mostly because I didn't know what I was getting, and you put a little box in my system, and I'm like, you're going to charge me what to connect a little box in to send me an email a month. And I don't mean that in any disrespect, but help me and all of us understand why there's the cost that's involved in this. And then if you can put it in perspective, because I know you don't just work with small businesses, you work with some very large companies. I don't know if you can name them or not on this, but so you see what I don't see. So help me understand the cost what's involved and put it into
Right.
perspective.
Yeah, so I mean, our business in this space really comes down to three pieces that we offer, right? We offer kind of a yearly investigation or a cybersecurity evaluation where we provide recommendations, kind of a one-stop shop, right? Like we go in, we scan the network, we get some data, and that's something we did for you, early on. We also offer the hey,
And that's
we'll
kind of like I want to break
yeah,
them up just to help. That's kind of like coming in and doing a home inspection, right? You come in, you're
oh,
like, I'm going to do a snapshot in time, walk through, see where your vulnerabilities are,
yeah.
give you some recommendations on what you need to fix, how to fix it, and whatnot.
Yeah, and we're
Yep.
happy to help with the fixing, but realistically, it's like here, hand this to your IT team or your cousin or your nephew who does your IT stuff, and have them, do it. It's not the best model, but it's certainly a cheap
It's a
way to
place to
kind of
start. Yep.
yeah, it's a place to start. It's a place to understand what the scope is that you need to handle. Um, so that's kind of the one hit wonder, right? And then in the middle is okay, we're going to do that, but we're also going to do this ongoing monitoring, right? So that's the little probe box, which I don't have one handy here, but it's just a little black box that we put on your network, and it basically scans your network, makes sure everything's good. We can, we put some software on the machines and kind of babysit them. And just make sure that they're updated, that there's no like open passwords, there's no vulnerabilities. So it's like it's ongoing protection. So this is like your ADT or Bay alarm, right? Like we're keeping an eye on things. We also do stuff like if your network goes offline, a lot of times I think, I'll call you or I'll text you or whatever, but you're notified that there's a problem, right? That there's something that could impact your practice.
And I have to
So
tell
there,
you, you're the first one to notify me. Right? I get a message from you before I get a message from anybody at the office. If there's a power outage, I get a message from you before I get a message from the power company. You guys are on that.
well, yeah, I mean, it comes from, I spent 12 years at NBC, right? So it's 24/7, always on the air, always ready to go. And I know that if you can't see patients, you can't make money, you can't, like you're still paying your employees. It's costing you, real profitability if you're shut down for a day for an internet outage or whatever. And so, to me, it's important to get on those things and figure out what caused it. How do we fix it? How do we get you back up and running? Um, and that leads me to the third one, which is where we see a lot of the more sophisticated or bigger practices, and that's the kind of full show, right? So we run the network, we manage all the computers, we manage the help desk, and if your users have a problem or there's an issue, we jump on it, and we're basically your IT, right? You don't have to have anybody else. So we run the spectrum of all three of those, and various practices and clients of ours will start at one level and move up or move down depending on what their needs are, and we're happy to kind of facilitate that. But you brought up the price tag. A lot of times there's this sticker shock of like, hey, I've been paying my nephew to do this and he charges me $10 an hour. Why are you charging me $400 a month to monitor my network? And it really is, you're getting something completely different out of it, right? What we're bringing to that is that level of a Fortune 500 company, that reliability, that vulnerability assessment, the making sure that your systems are up and running. We're bringing that tempo, that 5 nines of reliability, 99.999% reliability, to your practice. If you were to do that in a Fortune 500 company where they do that stuff, you're talking tens or hundreds of employees, lots of software and systems, lots of stuff like that. So we do that, but we then scale it down to practice level size, right? So we're essentially kind of taking that whole cost and breaking it apart by practice, so that you're not paying for all that just in and of yourself as your practice. You're kind of sharing those resources across multiple practices who all have the same problem, right? But it is more expensive, and it's because it comes with that expertise and reliability metric that's attached to it. And the systems are expensive. I mean, we use a lot of tools that are very sophisticated. Like the agent that we load on the computers, it makes sure the computers aren't vulnerable, they're patched, they've got all the latest software updates, all that stuff. Those are expensive software tools that we have to kind of employ. And so, there's a cost to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the math that I look at is what does it cost you if you have a breach of sorts, right? And this is where a lot of times I get brought in on the back end of, somebody's had a breach and now we have to go clean it up. We have to assess how bad it is. And people really underestimate the amount of money that costs. Forget my costs, right? I'm coming in, I get a call at 11 o'clock at night, and now we've got to go rescue a practice the following day or, very soon afterwards. That's an expensive endeavor, whether it's me or one of my team kind of flying out there or, remotely doing stuff. I mean, you're talking, 100, 200 hours worth of time for a very expensive person to assess the damage. And then you've got to go notify all your patients, all your employees. You've got to do the reporting, the mandatory reporting to the federal government. Like, there's just a lot that comes along with a breach. And if you can prevent it, great, right? That's our first hope, is that we prevent the breach entirely. But what we're also looking for is, if there is a breach, we're looking to manage it and keep it as small as possible so that the costs for the practice are not, exorbitant afterwards. And so the way I look at it is, it's an insurance policy. It's just like paying for house insurance or car insurance. It's, you're trying to mitigate risk as much as possible, and that's expensive, unfortunately, because there's so many risks out there that we have to manage.
Yep. The Myopia Collective. CooperVision and the AOA have partnered in a groundbreaking initiative to change the way optometrists in the U.S. treat children with myopia. The purpose of the Myopia Collective is to rally the profession of optometry and its allies to interrupt the status quo and elevate the new standard of care for children with myopia. Every individual is encouraged to become a member of the collective. By joining, you commit to taking action to help slow the progression of myopia in children. You'll receive updates and information about the collective and its work in the fight against myopia, gain access to educational opportunities and resources offered by the collective, and hear from change agents, the ambassador optometrists selected to serve as advocates for community and policy change that facilitates the mission of the collective. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the show notes to join the collective today. In the past, our focus revolved around prescribing MacuHealth or MacuHealth Plus to patients at risk of macular degeneration, while also recommending it to collegiate and professional athletes for enhanced contrast sensitivity in sports performance. However, this year's introduction of the Life Meter has been a game changer. The Life Meter revealed a concerning truth. Many of my patients have alarmingly low skin carotenoid levels, indicating potential deficiencies in essential body tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, Life Meter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness has been demonstrated across 2,000 subjects with diverse backgrounds. With this newfound insight, I can now have meaningful conversations about carotenoid levels with all of my patients, even those who may seem outwardly healthy. To learn more about this empowering technology, feel free to contact your MacuHealth representative or click on the link in the show notes. Together, let's optimize patient care and elevate their well-being. We all know how important good vision is, but more than 1 billion people worldwide still lack access to the eye care they need. So join me in supporting Optometry Giving Sight's World Sight Day Challenge, which runs from September 1st through October 31st. You can donate, create a fundraiser, or dedicate a day's exams fees. Visit givingsight.org/WSDC or click on the link in the show notes and help give the gift of sight. No, that makes sense. Thanks for breaking it down. You mentioned you related it to like an insurance policy. I was thinking slightly differently. I was thinking of it more like health in my world, taking care of somebody's health, because getting to an end stage disease, whether it's something that caused blindness, diabetes, to where now that you are dealing with amputations and maybe vision loss, there's a significant both financial and quality of life impact that it has. Whereas if you would have taken care of things for prevention or maintenance. Did I just screw up saying the word maintenance? Nobody will listen to this. But the cost of putting it in there, while there's still a cost, is overall significantly less than the cost of it going bad. And certainly there's the quality of life. I can sleep better at night knowing that it's good. The reason it wasn't exactly insurance in my mind is because there's systems, there's constant training. There's still something you got to do, right? You got to not eat chocolate cake and a carne asada burrito every day.
No, it is. It's good. You got to get on the life cycle and, the treadmill or whatever. I think that's a good analogy. I mean, just to give you some numbers, the cost for a basic breach, just an investigation, is $20,000. That doesn't include notifying all the patients or the employees that their data has been breached. Doesn't include the cost of going to the federal government and reporting it and then dealing with all the ramifications of that, or your malpractice insurer and all that, right? Like there's a whole bunch of other stuff. Just to have the really smart IT guy go in there, break it all apart and see what happened, where things went wrong, find out how bad the breach is, it's 20 grand. So if you can prevent that and spend a couple $100 a month, you do the math, it's a pretty decent ROI. Yeah. And that's like the bare minimum, right? If the breach is really bad and you have compromised patient information or employee information, I mean, now you're into you've got to send out the flyers, you've got to pay for the identity theft services. It can get into the $100,000 pretty fast.
You're well into six figures or close to it on that.
Easy.
Yep. So, no, I think that makes sense, and it's from a world where I don't get to feel and see, it's challenging, and I suspect that it's very similar when I'm trying to tell a patient who sees just fine that they've got this disease that they can't feel, they can't see, they don't know anything about. Glaucoma is a prime example, and now you've got to go buy medicine and put drops in your eyes every night that are going to sting and burn and turn your eyes red, and and it's going to prevent you from ever noticing that you actually do have a problem. So,
yeah, well, I mean, like a good example, a good analog to that is, on a lot of the networks that we manage, we have put content filtering on to make sure that data isn't leaving the practice and going to China or Russia or whatever. And part of the downside of that is when you go to a legitimate website, sometimes it's blocked, right? So you'll go to, an insurer or one of your providers who's, one of your vendors, and all of a sudden it'll say, this page is blocked, whatever, you can't go to it. And you got to reach out to the help desk and say, hey, unblock this page for me. It's a huge pain in the butt, right? Like it slows the practice down a little bit and it's annoying, but it serves a really important purpose. And that's where, just like multi-factor authentication, it's the little annoyances that we're trying to make, easier and lower the friction level. But at the same time, there's a reason why that's important. And it's specifically so that those bad actors in, China or Russia or wherever can't get your data. We're basically blocking everything that's not legitimate. And so sometimes, legitimate things get accidentally blocked and we got to unlock it, right? And anyways, it's another, it's getting on the treadmill, right? Or having a better diet. So,
I will say that it was a very interesting learning experience. We told our team that was going to happen. And, just like I got to vent at you at the beginning of this call, or this podcast, they were not so kind to me. They like to remind me that I was the dumbest person they've ever met, in not so nice words. And in some regards, there were sites that had been blocked that needed to open. There were other sites that led us down a further question of why do you need to access that?
Right.
What are you doing? Why is that important? What do we need to get from there? Why are you going there? There was a lot of personal, not like bad things, but just stuff on their own persona. I'm like, that's not a work activity. There's no reason a work computer needs to access any of that.
Well, so I'll tell you a story, and I can't name the practice, but a large surgery center we started with the phase one, like the cybersecurity analysis, noted some vulnerabilities, and quickly moved into like, okay, we need to probe this network on a regular basis and kind of the step two stuff, right? And we found that an employee had been doing crypto mining. And basically was sucking power out of the facility, using the power of the facility and some of the hardware, the computers and whatnot, to mine crypto, and had racked up some pretty sizable power bills and was using hardware that had patient data on it and a bunch of other stuff to mine cryptocurrency. And I can't remember the exact amount of cryptocurrency he had, but it was sizable. I mean, we're not into the six figures, but high, just under that. And he'd been doing it for a while, right? And it wasn't until we started probing the network and locking things down where we're like, why is all this traffic, going to this site that it shouldn't be going to, that we found out like what was going on. And I don't remember what the power bill was, but it was sizable once we shut it all down. And so, I mean, I'm not saying like everybody's got that kind of problem, but it does kind of organize your practice operations a little bit once you start saying, look, like we're not going to open up YouTube, we're not going to open up Instagram and Facebook. So it's painful, but there's a reason.
Well, and again, they have access to it.
Yeah.
Through
Sure.
Through a phone, and if you need to buy a phone or an iPad with cellular access for the practice, that's inexpensive, right?
Right.
And it protects it, and it's a whole lot easier because they're going to do the editing and the photos and whatnot from there anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So there was an easy way around it. I found too a lot of. In fact, one of the things I did find with the two-factor authentication is they stopped using their work emails for
personal stuff.
So whenever somebody leaves the office or we terminate or they spell an email address bad, I get the email. So it defaults to me because lots of names get spelled wrong. But the amount of personal stuff and the amount of crap and like mailing lists that either get put on or signed up for is insane. So making
that's where
it harder to access your work email has helped eliminate that.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the majority of phishing attacks come from, right? It comes from a Costco looking or a Best Buy looking email. And if you're mixing personal and work, it becomes harder to differentiate between the two. I mean, separating that out is really important. And then, sometimes legitimate vendors or other folks will get, compromised in some way. And so you'll get an email. I mean, the one that kills me is the invoices, right? So they'll send you invoices that you'll pay because it looks legitimate, and they're going to a third party. And that happens all the time. And sometimes it takes a year or two to catch some of that. And in the meantime, the practice or the business has spent, tens of thousands of dollars sending, to paying off fraudulent invoices. So,
yeah, no, always good to have checks and balances in there. So let's walk through just kind of, in a nutshell, some of the tactical stuff that we've done in the practice for us. Because I think if I'm listening to this for the first time and I haven't done anything yet, and I don't want to come in and flip my whole world upside down. Because you showed me the list of things that we could do, and I was like, whoa. And you said, no, take a breath. Like we start here and then we work our way through.
Prioritize, right?
Yeah, prioritize, and there's a lot of nice to haves, right, and could haves at some days. So I think from a just real life example, you came in and you did the assessment. I was surprised at the number of vulnerabilities that we had, just open ports, and you had to explain to me what a port was.
Right.
I was surprised, and it's naive looking back, but how much of the capital equipment, all my diagnostic instruments, how vulnerable they were, which in some regards makes sense because they've got to make sure when they give you the computer that you can access it to your system, right? And we can argue whether it's their job or not to figure out how to lock it down. Ultimately, it's my responsibility. But I was surprised at how leaky we were, or how porous we were, rather. And quite frankly, it was pretty easy to lock all that down, if I recall.
Yeah, but most of that stuff. So, I mean, in terms of the prioritization, it always comes down to how easy is it to implement and what's the payoff? What's the risk if you don't do it, right?
Yep.
And so we always try to prioritize it in that way, kind of across that matrix of saying, like, look, there's a big payoff. There's, you're changing out your network is probably one of the easiest. ID management's the other one, right? Like, it's a little painful to get into, but once you do it, the dividends are huge, right? Because, like ID management's one of the ones we've talked about where, you don't share logins across people, or you lock down to Google or Microsoft, and then everything comes off of those accounts, so that if an employee leaves, you terminate their access to Google or Microsoft, and all their ancillary access also goes away, right? It's all gone. There's a ton of ways to do that, but sometimes the simplest, just not having a shared email inbox and instead having a group inbox that everyone has access to, like that's an easy way to kind of lock down some stuff. The network's another one, right? Just of having a secure network that matters, and then making sure your systems are updated and don't have any vulnerabilities is kind of the third, kind of low-hanging fruit that people need to go after. So, identity management, network, and vulnerability patching, updates for the computer. If you handle those three things well, you've done 90% of what the vulnerability or risk is. You've handled it, or at least mitigated it. And then, to your point, like some of the providers in this space, because they're niche providers, they're small companies, a lot of times I don't want to say they neglect security, but it's not a top priority for them. Or they have an open system because they're used to having to integrate with a bunch of other third parties that they don't want to close down. And, having worked with those, the big optometry equipment providers, we kind of know where their vulnerabilities are, right? Like we know what their admin password is, and that needs to get changed, and we know what ports are open and those need to get closed or whatever. And so there are some that are better than others. But at the end of the day, if we can't mitigate it with the vendor, then we have to mitigate it with the network or some other control, right? And that's where having a more sophisticated IT provider helps, because it's not, oh, well, we can't fix it. They have to use this password, or they have to have that port open. It's, oh, we can put that behind a firewall and kind of wall it off a little bit so that it's, it's not as vulnerable, and it still gets all the access that they need. So there, there's ways to work through it. And sometimes I feel like the clients feel like it's, eating the elephant, and you don't have to tackle it all at once, right? Like you can do it over time. Just do it in a way that is most cost effective for you, but also it provides the greatest risk payoff long term.
No, and that makes complete sense. You made me think of something else too, and you had referenced earlier, your friend, your nephew, your whomever. I think there's this took me a while to understand, but there's a difference between somebody who can do a task for somebody who understands not just how to do the tasks, but how to fix the tasks when they break down. There's a difference between somebody who knows how to drive a car versus somebody who knows how to fix the engine.
Right.
And our previous IT guy, great dude, right, could help network the printers, which at the time was the biggest pain in the rear end that we had, because darn things never worked,
right.
Except for when he was in the office. But it's one thing to know how to just set up a network system. It's another thing to be able to identify the problems, figure out the solutions, and if the first solution doesn't seem to work, figure out how to make it work, right? Just because you understand all the pieces at play, which goes from being a jack of all trades or a handyman to being truly an expert in what you're doing.
Right. Well, and a lot of the MSPs, right, managed service providers that provide IT services, they want to own everything. They want to have all the passwords. They want to control it all. And if you want to add a printer, or if you want to do something, they're going to send somebody on site and charge you $100 an hour for doing that. Our business model is a little different, right? Like that's not as important to us. It's important that it's done right. And so a lot of times we end up working with the nephew or the brother or the uncle or whatever and saying, here's what I need you to do. Here are the 10 things you need to accomplish. You and the practice, whoever owns the practice, you guys go sort out, how to do it and who's going to pay for it. If you need help, we're here to help, right? Like we don't have to do it all for you. We're happy to do it, but it's not like you have to buy the full thing to make it work. And so honestly, like that's one of the best parts of my job is especially some of these, I'd say kids, but they're, 20, 25 years old, who are, learning in the business. They're starting out in IT. They're, a friend or family member of somebody who owns a practice. And, I'm happy to sit on the phone with them and walk them through what they need to do and not have to, send somebody out to go handle that and rather kind of walk them through what they need to do. And then, checking on the back end that it was done right and that, the work is solid and that the vulnerabilities patched or whatever. We do that all the time. And, I'm used to working, especially when I worked at NBC, I'm used to working with people at all levels, right? From like the, very, new to technology all the way through the kind of experts and making sure that, a lot of times for us, it's coming in and making sure that the systems are protected correctly and giving them a list of tasks to do. Whether we do the tasks or not doesn't really matter as long as they get done. So, if you are a practice that has the nephew or the cousin who's doing the IT, that's completely fine. Using a service like ours to make sure that you're not vulnerable is important. And then we'll work with whoever to kind of fill those gaps. So, you don't have to give up your nephew, I guess is what I'm.
No, great point. Great point. And I've passed off any IT responsibilities to Skylar because I quickly learned that he was significantly more advanced than I am.
We communicate regularly about you and then about the IT in the shop.
Well, you can share me the stories about me later over a beer when we're not recording. But there have been things too also that as we get close to wrapping up that I want to call out too. It's, we were, I don't want to say overpaying for the computers, but we were overbuying technology that we weren't using. We were buying beefed up system because I didn't know any better, and so you've helped us, streamline getting the right equipment that we need, which in and of itself has saved thousands, and helped us become more streamlined and more efficient on those, because most of our stuff at least is just browser based, so I don't need a ton of memory. I can just get some less expensive technology that's going to last until technology advances, and then I'm not out thousands of dollars because I made large investments in stuff that I wasn't going to use. I don't need to buy the huge lifted 4-wheel drive truck with all the fancy features if I just am driving across the street.
You don't need the MacBook Pro, a Chromebook works, and, you need the browser and you need it to be secure. And honestly, I see that a lot too, with just gear that your typical kind of MSP wants. A lot of times they'll sell it to you, but they want kind of uniformity because it's easy to manage, and they want to install it for you. They want to turn it on for you. They want to do whatever. And one of the things with Skylar, you guys will buy a new PC for replacement or whatever. All he needs to do is put the agent on it that we provide, and it does it all kind of for him. He has to set up for the practice or whatever, but all the security stuff kind of gets done. Yeah. And so, if you have that resource internally, whether they work at the practice or it's a third party, they can continue to kind of do that stuff, and we can help. With I think we did with you guys, your connectivity provider. I think you were overpaying for that. There's just other services that you might be overpaying for, where we can go in and say hey, you don't really need this. You can scale this back, or there's a cheaper way to kind of accomplish it. So all that.
It's definitely, we paid, but there was also a savings on the back end. One with efficiencies, two with securities, but also just not needing to buy things that we didn't need.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and the other thing a lot of times that people don't think about is, when you're buying equipment for the practice, we provide a list of kind of our recommended stuff, but you don't have to buy that. Obviously, buy whatever you want. But it really is when you're buying stuff for a practice, or you're investing, a couple $1,000 or whatever. It's a good time to take a step back and say, how does this fit into my operation, and is it the right tool for the job? Is there something I'm missing where I don't need this tool and I can use this other tool over here? Or is there something I need to be doing differently? And that's a lot of times where you and I will chat, hey, I want to buy this. Is this the right thing to buy? No, buy this over here. This is a better product, right? Or it's, maybe cheaper or whatever. So I think there is a cost to our services, but there's also a way for us to save practices money. And, it doesn't always have to come at the kind of amorphous, risk mitigation, right? Sometimes it's actual hard dollars in terms of connectivity or equipment, where we can help. So,
well, I appreciate it. Last question. Remind me where the name Promethean One comes from.
So it's actually it's a funny story. I'm not way into Greek mythology or anything, but my dad and I were coming up with a way to name the company, and we wanted something unique. And I was doing some research on, what are some, kind of tier 2 concepts of technology? And basically it's, Prometheus brought fire to the humans and then got punished for it. And so he's kind of the god of technology, right? And I always like the fact that there was this punishment for it, because you bring in these new tools or this new technology, whether it's multi-factor authentication or whatever, and there's always kind of the backlash of oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. So that's where it comes from, and it's kind of an inside joke that's funny and it's stuck. But yeah, that's the joke.
So we came full circle to how we started, and didn't even plan it.
good note to end on, right? So
That was nice. Awesome, Dave. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your service, your friendship, and all your help. Your contact information will be in the show notes. So if anybody wants
awesome.
to
Yeah.
reach out to you, please do. We've had a wonderful experience. And if it's not Dave, just from my conversations with him, my conversations with Joe DeLoach over at Practice Performance Partners, what I've seen in the industry, I don't think this is something that we can keep on the to-do list any longer. I think it needs to bump up that list to the priority section and really check off, because this is I'm really concerned that this is going to be the next thing that kind of hits us and hurts us and really is what negatively affects the business, quite frankly, if we don't have it taken care of.
Well, yeah, and I just, for folks that are watching or listening, if you want to set up a phone call and have a quick chat just to see where things are at and, kind of talk through, there's no like cost or obligation to it. I'm happy to chat with whoever about whatever. I love talking about this stuff. So, always happy to help somebody out. And then if it leads to a business opportunity, great. And if it doesn't, no big deal. So, yeah, like Aaron said, my contact info will be in there, and feel free to reach out, and happy to talk to anybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.